My son was accused of cheating at school, until the school discovered his genius matched my billionaire ex-husband's child. Mrs. Ward, I'm afraid your son's project is too sophisticated for a child of his circumstances. I felt my hands curl into fists as Principal Pierce smiled that practiced, empty smile. Too sophisticated. The words were careful, polished, but I heard what he really meant. Too poor. Too ordinary. Too impossible for a single mother's son who built his science project on a kitchen table between my double shifts at the hospital. My son didn't cheat, I said, my voice steadier than my racing heart. He's brilliant. And just because he doesn't have a trust fund doesn't mean he's not capable of creating something extraordinary. Miranda Locke, dripping in designer labels and contempt, let out a sharp laugh. Please. My Adrian has had access to MIT consultants, private laboratories, and the finest tutors money can buy. This boy lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside. The very suggestion that he could independently develop something matching my son's work is absurd. I watched my 12-year-old son standing in that doorway, tears fighting to break free, his small frame trembling with an emotion I knew too well. The same fierce determination I'd felt 13 years ago when I ran from his father with nothing but the clothes on my back and a secret growing inside me. I want to explain my work, Noah said, his voice cracking but unwavering. I want to show everyone my journals, my calculations. I want them to see that I built this myself. That I earned this. What happened next in that auditorium, in front of dozens of wealthy parents and school officials, would shatter everything I'd carefully constructed over 12 years. Because when Dr. Evelyn Rowan stood up with her findings, when those 7 words left her lips, I knew the truth I'd buried so deep was about to destroy us or set us free. Their cognitive signatures match. They're related. Have you ever built an entire life on protecting someone you love, only to watch it unravel in 60 seconds? Have you ever fought so hard to keep your child safe that you forgot he might need more than just safety? If you've ever stood alone against a world that judged you before knowing you, then you understand what happened that rainy afternoon at Hillcrest Innovation Academy. And if this story speaks to you, if you believe truth always finds its way to light no matter how deep we bury it, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Stephen Stories. Because what you're about to hear will remind you why courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing up anyway when everything inside you screams to run. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. 3 hours before my world changed forever. The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets, each drop exploding in a fury that matched the storm building in my chest. My knuckles had gone white against the steering wheel, the worn leather cracking beneath my grip. Beside me, Noah clutched his cardboard box like it contained the secrets of the universe. And maybe, in a way, it did. Mom, what if they don't understand it? His voice carried that peculiar quality that defined my son. Confidence wrapped around vulnerability. A boy who could solve university-level physics problems in his head but still needed me to check under his bed for monsters. I glanced at him, really looked at him, and saw myself reflected back. That same anxious determination. That same refusal to be anything less than authentic even when the world demanded we shrink ourselves to fit their expectations. Then you explain it until they do, I said softly, pulling into the parking lot of Hillcrest Innovation Academy. The building rose before us like a temple to privilege. All glass and steel and impossible promise. So different from our cramped apartment where Noah had spent 3 months building his renewable energy prototype on our kitchen table. Between my double shifts. Between the nights I came home so exhausted I could barely stand. Between the moments I watched him work and wondered if his father had looked the same way, bent over equations and dreams, before everything fell apart. Thunder rolled overhead as I touched Noah's shoulder. No matter what happens today, your mind is your gift. No one can take that from you. He nodded, carefully lifting his project as we ran through the downpour toward the entrance. My worn shoes splashed through puddles, water seeping through the cracks I couldn't afford to repair. Around us, sleek black cars deposited children in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. Their projects carried by assistants under oversized umbrellas. Protected. Pristine. Perfect. We were neither of those things. But we were here. And that had to count for something. Inside, the expo hall hummed with a particular frequency I'd learned to recognize over the years. Wealth. Ambition. The casual cruelty of people who'd never had to choose between electricity and groceries. Parents clustered in groups, their expensive suits and practiced laughs filling the space like they owned it. Maybe they did. I felt the familiar weight settle over me. Not belonging. The subtle glances that catalogued my off-brand blazer, Noah's too short sleeves, the fraying edges of our careful disguise as people who fit in this world. But Noah didn't notice. His attention had locked onto something across the hall. I followed his gaze and felt the air leave my lungs in one sharp exhale. A boy his age stood beside a display that made my heart stop. Even from this distance, I could see it. The same elegant design principles. The same innovative approach to sustainable energy conversion. The same impossible coincidence that couldn't possibly be a coincidence at all. The boy turned. And Elena Ward's carefully constructed world tilted sideways. He had Adrian's eyes. That same piercing intelligence that used to watch me across our tiny apartment 13 years ago. That same thoughtful intensity I'd fallen in love with back when we had nothing but dreams and each other. Before the money. Before Miranda. Before I ran with a secret that would change everything if it ever came to light. Mom. Noah tugged my sleeve, pulling me back from the edge of memory. That's Adrian Locke Jr. His project, it's like mine. Not the same, but like we were thinking the same thoughts. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the two boys approach each other. There was something in the way they moved. A cautious respect. Like equals recognizing each other across a crowded room full of people who would never understand what it meant to see the world in equations and possibilities. They exchanged nods. And I saw something pass between them. A wordless understanding that transcended the obvious divide of their circumstances. Rich and poor. Privileged and struggling. Connected by something deeper than either of them could possibly know. I forced myself to breathe. To smile. To not reveal the panic clawing up my throat with razor-sharp fingers. 12 years. 12 years I'd kept Noah safe. Kept him hidden. Rebuilt a life from ashes and determination and the fierce love only a mother who's lost everything can understand. And now, in one moment, the past and present collided in a way I'd never anticipated. Never prepared for. Never wanted. A woman materialized beside Adrian Jr. designer heels clicking on polished floors like a countdown to disaster. Miranda Locke. I recognized her from business magazines. From the society pages I'd tortured myself with in those early years when the wound was still fresh. Adrian's wife. The woman he'd married 6 months after I fled into the night. Miranda's gaze swept over Noah with practiced dismissal. The kind of look that reduces a person to their bank account and zip code. Then her eyes sharpened as she noticed his project. I watched her expression shift through surprise, suspicion, and finally, cold accusation. Harlan, she called to the principal hovering nearby like a well-dressed shadow. We have a problem. My stomach dropped. Mr. Harlan Pierce approached with his professional smile firmly in place. Empty. Meaningless. I'd met with him twice before. Once when Noah had tested off the charts for their scholarship program. Again when I'd explained, carefully and with just enough truth to satisfy without revealing everything, that Noah's father wasn't in the picture and never would be. The next 30 minutes blurred into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Whispers spread through the expo hall like wildfire in drought season. Parents clustered in tight groups, pointing, their voices carrying just loud enough for us to hear. Scholarship student. Single mother. Too similar to be coincidence. The words built into a wall around us, brick by poisonous brick. Noah's face crumpled. I watched my brilliant, beautiful boy try to hold himself together as accusation after accusation crashed over him like waves designed to drown. Mom, I didn't copy anyone. I swear. I swear on everything. His voice broke on the last word. I know, baby. I know. I pulled him close, not caring who saw, not caring what they thought. We're going to fix this. But even as I said it, I felt Pierce's hand on my elbow, steering us away from the crowd, away from Noah's project, into his office where the real knives would come out dressed in polite suggestions and concerned expressions. Miranda followed us in. Of course she did. This was her world. Her rules. Her son's future to protect at the cost of mine. Mrs. Ward, Pierce began, settling into his leather chair like a judge preparing to deliver sentence. Perhaps it would be easier for everyone if Noah simply withdrew from the competition. No formal accusation. No permanent record. Just a quiet exit that allows us all to move past this unfortunate similarity. No. The word came out harder than I intended. Sharp enough to cut. My son didn't cheat. He wouldn't. He's brilliant, and just because he doesn't have a trust fund doesn't mean he's not capable of creating something extraordinary. Nobody suggesting otherwise, Pierce interrupted, though his eyes told a different story. But you have to understand, the similarity is remarkable. And Mrs. Locke is quite insistent that her son's work was developed with significant resources and expert consultation. Perhaps Noah saw Adrian's preliminary design somewhere. Inadvertently. These things happen. These things happen. I leaned forward, years of biting my tongue, of swallowing injustice, of staying small to stay safe, finally reaching their breaking point. You mean poor kids steal from rich kids because that's just what we do? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. Miranda's voice cut through the tension like a blade. This is absurd. Adrian has had tutors, access to his father's laboratories, consultants from MIT. This boy lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside. The very suggestion that he could independently develop something this sophisticated is what? I stood, every muscle in my body coiled tight. Impossible. Because we're poor. Because his mother is a nurse instead of a socialite. Because we don't have the right address or the right connections or the right last name. The room fell into sharp silence. Pierce looked uncomfortable. Miranda looked furious. And Noah stood in the doorway, small for his age but blazing with an intensity that reminded me painfully of his father. I want to explain my work, Noah said. His voice cracked but held steady. I want to show everyone my journals, my calculations. I want them to see that I built this myself. That I earned this. Pierce shifted in his chair. Son, I don't think that's. I'm not your son. Noah's green eyes, so like Adrian's it hurt to look at them, fixed on the principal with unexpected steel. And I didn't do anything wrong. So unless you're expelling me, unless you're officially accusing me of cheating, I'm going to stand in front of everyone at the judging and defend my work. Because that's what innocent people do. Miranda's face flushed red. This is outrageous. I won't have my family's reputation. Your family's reputation. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. What about my son's future? What about his reputation? Or does that not matter because we don't donate wings to buildings? The confrontation spiraled from there. Accusations. Counter-accusations. Pierce trying to maintain order while clearly favoring the woman who could fund entire programs with a phone call. I fought for Noah with everything I had, every weapon in my limited arsenal, knowing it probably wasn't enough but unable to do anything else. Finally, Pierce held up his hands. Enough. I'm suspending both boys from the competition pending a formal investigation. We'll bring in an independent evaluator. Someone with expertise in gifted education and academic integrity. Until then, both projects will be secured, and both students will refrain from discussing this matter publicly. Both students? Miranda's voice could have frozen fire. My son is the victim here. The investigator will determine that, Pierce replied, though his tone suggested he'd already made up his mind. We left his office in silence. Noah's shoulders shook with the effort of holding back tears. I wanted to promise him everything would be okay. But I'd learned long ago that some promises are just pretty lies we tell to make the unbearable bearable. The next 3 days crawled by like years. Noah barely spoke. Barely ate. He sat at our kitchen table, staring at his journals, at the equations he'd worked so hard to develop, wondering if his honesty mattered at all in a world that had already decided what truth looked like. I called in sick to work. Something I never did. We couldn't afford it. But I couldn't leave him alone with this weight crushing down on his 12-year-old shoulders. On the third day, Dr. Evelyn Rowan arrived at our apartment. She was smaller than I expected. Mid-50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a gentle manner that put Noah immediately at ease. I'd researched her obsessively since Pierce mentioned her name. A cognitive scientist with a reputation for identifying genius in unlikely places. She'd written papers on gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds. On how poverty masked brilliance because the world wasn't looking for diamonds in the rough. Noah, she said, settling into our worn couch like she belonged there. I'm not here to catch you in a lie. I'm here to understand how you think. Can you show me? For the next 4 hours, she asked questions. Looked through his journals. Watched him work through problems in real time. She didn't comment. Didn't judge. Just observed with the focused attention of someone who actually cared about truth over narrative. When she left, she squeezed my shoulder. He's remarkable, Mrs. Ward. Truly remarkable. I'll see you at the hearing. The hearing. The word alone made my chest tighten. But I nodded and closed the door, leaning against it as relief and terror warred inside me. 2 days later, I sat in the back of the school auditorium, watching a hearing that felt more like a trial. The room had been arranged like a courtroom. Parents, teachers, and school board members filled the seats like a jury. At the front, a long table held Pierce, 2 board members, and Dr. Rowan. The Locke family occupied the front row. Miranda sat rigid, her spine a line of indignation and barely contained fury. Adrian Jr. fidgeted beside her, clearly uncomfortable with the spectacle his mother had created. And at the end of the row, the man I hadn't seen in 12 years. Adrian Locke Sr. looked older. More weathered. Time and success had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there when we were young and hungry and convinced we could change the world together. But he still carried himself with that quiet authority that had first attracted me. Still had that focused intensity in his eyes that made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he looked at you. He hadn't seen me yet. I sat in the back shadows, my heart a war drum against my ribs, praying he wouldn't. Not yet. Not before this was over. Memories flooded back unbidden. Our tiny apartment that smelled like takeout and dreams. Adrian bent over his laptop at 3 in the morning, working on the startup that would eventually make him billions. Me beside him, believing in possibilities neither of us could quite see yet. Before Miranda's father had offered him everything. Before the choice. Before I became the price of his success. Before I discovered I was pregnant and made the hardest decision of my life. The hearing began with Pierce's opening statement. Neutral words designed to sound fair while subtly weighting the scales. Then Miranda took the floor, her testimony a masterclass in weaponizing privilege. My son has worked with the best minds in technology, she said, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been questioned. He's had access to resources, guidance, expertise that most adults would envy. The idea that some scholarship student could independently arrive at such similar conclusions is statistically improbable at best, intellectually dishonest at worst. I felt my nails dig into my palms. Scholarship student. The way she said it, like a diagnosis. Like an accusation in itself. Then it was my turn. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the front of the auditorium, feeling every eye track my movement. Judging my discount store dress. My worn shoes. My obvious lack of belonging in their world. My son, I began, my voice stronger than I felt, has never had tutors or laboratories or consultants. What he has had is a mind that sees the world differently. That finds patterns where others see chaos. That asks questions no one else thinks to ask. I looked directly at Miranda. He built his project on our kitchen table between my shifts at the hospital. With parts he saved for months to afford. With a determination I've watched grow since he was old enough to hold a pencil and start filling notebooks with ideas I couldn't begin to understand. Mrs. Ward, one of the board members interrupted, "Surely you can see how the similarity raises questions." "I can see how you wanted to raise questions," I replied. "I can see how it's easier to assume the poor kid cheated than to accept he might be just as brilliant as the rich kid. Maybe more so, because he did it without any of the advantages you all take for granted." The room stirred. Uncomfortable shifting. Exchanged glances. I'd crossed a line. Spoken a truth they all knew but pretended didn't exist. Noah testified next. My brave, brilliant boy stood before them and explained his work with a clarity and passion that should have erased all doubt. He showed his journals. Walked them through his thinking process. Answered every technical question they threw at him without hesitation. Then Adrian Jr. took his turn. And I watched something unexpected happen. Instead of distancing himself from Noah, instead of feeding into his mother's narrative, he told the truth. "I never showed Noah my work," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I never even talked to him before the expo. But when I saw his project, Dad, it felt like looking in a mirror. Like meeting someone who thinks the same way I do. That's not cheating. That's just two people who see the world through the same lens." Miranda's face went pale with fury. But Adrian Sr. leaned forward, his attention fully focused on his son in a way that made my heart clench with old, familiar pain. Finally, Dr. Rowan took the floor. She presented her findings with clinical precision, each word carefully chosen, each conclusion backed by hours of interviews and analysis. Both boys, she explained, possess rare pattern recognition abilities. Both show similar problem-solving pathways. Both have independent journals full of original work that predates this competition by months. Their approaches, while arriving at similar conclusions, differ in specific implementation details that suggest independent development. She paused, letting her words settle over the room like snow. What's most fascinating is that their cognitive signatures are remarkably similar. In my 30 years of studying gifted children, I've only seen this kind of parallel thinking in related individuals. Adrian Sr.'s voice cut through the silence like a blade. Every head turned. He stood slowly, his eyes moving from his son to Noah and back again. In family members. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning strikes. When the air turns electric and you know everything is about to change but you can't stop it, can't prepare, can only hold your breath and wait for impact. I felt the room's attention shift. Felt the moment they all started to put pieces together. Felt the secret I'd buried for 12 years begin to claw its way to the surface. Noah. My voice barely worked. Please step outside with Mrs. Chen. Mom, what's happening? Now, baby. Please. Mrs. Chen, the art teacher who'd always been kind to us, guided Noah toward the door. He looked back at me, confused and frightened, and I tried to smile reassurance I didn't feel. When the door closed, I stood. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. Miranda's confused. Adrian Sr.'s beginning to understand. Pierce's impatient. Dr. Rowan's compassionate. 12 years of secrets weighed on my tongue. Years of protection and fear and fierce love for the child I'd raised alone. I'd built a life on keeping this buried. On keeping Noah safe from a past that could destroy us both. But standing there, I realized something. The truth was coming out whether I controlled it or not. The only choice I had was how. 13 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. I was married to a man who worked for Lock Technologies. I watched Adrian's face. Saw memory stirring. Saw him trying to place me in his past. Adrian Sr. was just starting out then. Brilliant but struggling. My husband became his colleague. Close enough to work late nights on projects together. Close enough that Adrian would have known him well. What does this have to do with, Miranda started. Everything, I interrupted. My husband became volatile. Controlling. Dangerous. When I finally escaped, I was 8 weeks pregnant. I chose not to tell anyone. Chose to start over completely. Because I needed Noah to be safe. I needed him to have a childhood without fear, without violence, without the complications of a world I'd left behind. My composure cracked. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not here. My ex-husband worked closely with you in those early days, Adrian. Close enough that you would have known him. Close enough that if you looked at my son, really looked, you might recognize traces of someone from your past. Understanding crashed across Adrian's features like a wave. His face went white. Marcus, he whispered. Marcus Hayward. I nodded. And in that moment, I saw him remembering. The colleague who'd been brilliant until he wasn't. Whose personal issues began interfering with work. Who'd become erratic, unreliable, dangerous in small ways that added up to something terrifying. Who'd been quietly let go around the same time a woman named Elena disappeared without a trace. Noah doesn't know his father, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the shocked silence. And he never will. Marcus was dangerous. Destructive. I made sure we were untraceable when I left. But that also meant cutting ties with anyone who might have connected us to that old life. Including me, Adrian said, his voice rough with realization. There was someone. A woman who kept calling the office, asking about Marcus, asking if he had family. I never knew it was you. I made sure you didn't. My composure finally shattered. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. Let them see. Let them all see what 12 years of running and hiding and protecting had cost. Because Noah deserved better than to be collateral damage in someone else's story. He deserved to be just himself. Brilliant and kind and safe. The auditorium erupted. Whispers. Gasps. People trying to process what they'd just heard. But I only saw Adrian Sr. only watched as understanding, shock, and something that looked like devastation crossed his features in waves. Then Adrian Jr. stood. His young voice cut through the chaos. I never showed Noah my work. I never even talked to him before today. But when I saw his project, Dad, it felt like looking in a mirror. Like meeting someone who thinks the same way I do. He turned to face the room. If Dr. Rowan is right, if we're related somehow, then doesn't that prove Noah didn't cheat? Doesn't that prove we're both just brilliant in the same way? Dr. Rowan cleared her throat. If I may, the genetic component here actually supports my findings. These boys share similar cognitive patterns not because one copied the other, but because they're working from similar neurological frameworks. They're both exceptional. Both original. Both deserve recognition for their individual achievements. The board members huddled together, their whispered conference stretching into an eternity. I counted the minutes. 27 of them. Each one a small lifetime. Each one another chance for this to go wrong. Finally, they returned to their seats. The head of the board, a silver-haired woman named Dr. Patricia Wells, stood. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, this board has reached a unanimous decision. Both Noah Ward and Adrian Locke Jr. are cleared of all accusations of academic dishonesty. Furthermore, both projects are deemed original, exceptional, and worthy of recognition. Therefore, we award joint first place to both students. The auditorium erupted in applause. Genuine this time. Not the polite clapping of obligation but real appreciation for justice finally served. I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. Couldn't process it over the relief flooding through me like a dam breaking. Noah would be okay. We would be okay. The truth hadn't destroyed us. It had set us free. Mrs. Chen opened the door and Noah burst through, his face a question mark of hope and fear. When he saw me crying, saw the room applauding, understanding dawned. We won? He asked, his voice small and uncertain. You won, I said, pulling him into my arms. You were brilliant and brave and you won. Across the room, Adrian Jr. caught Noah's eye. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Adrian smiled. And Noah smiled back. The beginning of something that looked like friendship. Like recognition. Like two people who'd found someone who understood them in a world that so rarely did. The crowd dispersed slowly, people stopping to congratulate Noah, to apologize with their eyes if not their words. Miranda left quickly, her heels clicking away like a retreat. She didn't look at me. Couldn't, probably. All her certainty about the world, about who mattered and who didn't, shaken by the revelation that brilliance doesn't come with a price tag. Outside, after the awards had been distributed, after the photographs and the handshakes and the promises of opportunities that might or might not materialize, Adrian Sr. approached me. He moved carefully. Like approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. Elena. My name sounded broken in his mouth. After all these years. After everything. Just my name, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Adrian. All these years. If I'd known. If you'd told me about Noah, about Marcus, about any of it, I would have. You would have what? I asked. Not cruel. Just curious. You built an empire. You have a family. You made your choices. I made mine. He's remarkable. Adrian's eyes shone with unshed tears. Your son. Marcus's, I don't even know how to, he's remarkable. And you raised him alone. You did what I couldn't. What Marcus never would have. You gave him everything that matters. I know. My voice softened despite myself. And he's mine, Adrian. Whatever happens next, whatever relationship you or your son might want with him, that decision is Noah's to make. Not yours. Not mine. His. Adrian nodded, accepting the boundary I'd drawn. I'd like to know him. If he's willing. Not as some billionaire patron swooping in to save the day. Just as someone who understands what it's like to think the way he does. Someone who sees the world in possibilities and equations. He paused, running a hand through hair that had more gray than I remembered. Miranda and I, we're separating. Have been for months. Built on the wrong foundation, I think. Her father's money in exchange for a good merger. I told myself it was about the company, about securing our future. But really, I was just too much of a coward to choose what I actually wanted. And what did you want? The question escaped before I could stop it. Adrian looked at me. Really looked. The way he used to across our tiny apartment when the world was full of promise and we were too young to know how easily promises break. I wanted you, he said simply. I wanted the life we talked about. The partnership. The dreams we built together at 3 in the morning over cold pizza and cheaper wine. But I was 25 and terrified and convinced that money would solve everything. He laughed, bitter and sad. Turns out money solves a lot. But it doesn't solve regret. I didn't know what to say to that. What words could possibly bridge 13 years and all the choices that stood between us like a canyon too wide to cross? I'm not asking for forgiveness, Adrian continued when I stayed silent. I'm not asking for anything, really. Just permission to know Noah. To maybe help, if help is wanted and welcome. And to tell you that seeing what you built, the person you raised, the strength you showed today, it's humbling in a way I didn't know I needed. Through the window, I could see Noah and Adrian Jr. deep in animated conversation. Noah's hands moving the way they always did when he got excited about an idea, drawing shapes in the air that only he could see. Adrian Jr. nodding along, clearly understanding in a way most people never did. He's growing up, I said softly. Making his own choices about who to let into his life. If he wants to know you, if he wants to build some kind of relationship with your son, that's his decision. I won't stand in his way. But I also won't push him toward it. He's had enough adults making decisions for him without his input. Fair, Adrian agreed. More than fair. We stood there in awkward silence, two people who used to know each other completely now strangers bound by a child neither of us had planned for. Truth has a way of lighting the path for those brave enough to stand in it, I finally said, echoing the words I'd whispered to Noah that morning in the rain. I was terrified the truth would destroy us. But maybe it's actually setting us free. Adrian smiled. Small and sad but genuine. You always were braver than me. The sun broke through the storm clouds that had hung over us all day, casting golden light across Hillcrest's glass facade. Inside, our sons laughed together over some shared joke, their brilliant minds already connecting in ways that transcended the complicated history of the adults who'd created them. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. The wounds were too deep, the years too long for that kind of easy resolution. But perhaps the beginning of peace. An acceptance that the past couldn't be changed but the future was still unwritten. Full of brilliant possibility. Mom! Noah called, bursting through the doors with Adrian Jr. beside him. Adrian wants to collaborate on a new project. Something about sustainable housing for low-income communities. Can we, is that okay? I looked at my son. My gift. My heart walking around outside my body for 12 years. He was asking permission but his eyes were already full of yes, already seeing possibilities I couldn't begin to imagine. It's your choice, baby, I said, touching his cheek the way I had when he was small. It's always your choice. Noah grinned and turned back to Adrian Jr., their conversation immediately diving into technical details that left both Adrian Sr. and me standing on the outside looking in at genius we'd helped create but could never fully understand. And that was okay. That was exactly how it should be. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that truth and courage and fierce love can overcome even the longest odds, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me what part of Elena and Noah's story hit you hardest. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. That brilliance isn't measured in bank accounts. That a mother's love is the most powerful force in the universe. Because at Mr. Stevens Stories, we believe in the power of truth to light the darkest paths. We believe in second chances and brave choices and the courage it takes to stand up when the whole world is telling you to sit down. Noah and Elena's story reminds us that genius can't be bought or stolen. It can only be recognized. And sometimes, the most brilliant thing we can do is simply be ourselves, unapologetically and completely, even when that self doesn't fit the mold society has carved for us. I'm Mr. Steven, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember this. Your mind is your gift. And no one, no matter how powerful, how wealthy, how certain they are of their place in the world, can ever take that from you. Stand in your truth. Fight for what's right. And never, ever let anyone make you small just because they can't see how big you really are.